Oh, all right, let's talk about anxiety. But don't stop, or don't leave, you're in the right place. We're doing a video on Swiftcurrent Pass, but anxiety is something that is a big part of this. So for example, right now I'm very anxious because there's a sign that says no loitering on steps. These doors behind me are closed. This is the courthouse in Findlay, Ohio. And there's a lot of hustle and bustle. It's rush hour, right? So people are gonna be stopping and cutting right in front of the camera, but that's acceptable. So the first quarter of the 19th century, psychologists coined this term neurasthenia. Now neurasthenia really became, much more common or much more used at the last bit of the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution. And it was sort of this diagnosis or mental health issue where working class men, like people who worked in factories, really started to feel isolated. They were overworked, tired, fatigued, stressed, all these things. And they were just stuck in the industrial centers of the United States. Well, let's turn to a guy called John Muir, right? And John Muir is this early environmentalist conservationist, and he takes neurasthenia and he can apply it to wilderness. And that's what I want to talk about. Now there's good stresses and bad stresses, right? It's like a good stress is something that leads to some sort of personal growth, or I guess it's anxiety or stress that helps you become better at something. So you could say like performance anxiety before, a big basketball game or something, or studying hard for a test and doing well on it, right? That leads to growth. There's also bad stresses, things that are really hard on people that may put yourself in a hole and it's hard to get out of, like divorce or possibly like drug use or something. And when we had all these industrial Americans working long hours all night in factories, they needed to a place to escape those dull, anxiety-ridden industrial centers. And so to bring all this full circle, Swiftcurrent Pass is a very anxiety-inducing hike, right? You gotta have some nerves of steel to do it. But it's one of those positive stresses, good anxiety that leads to growth. You'll be walking up and you'll be very nervous, but each step forward kind of helps you leave the burden of these busy industrial, everyday service industry life, right, in our jobs. And when we can go into the wilderness, it's really a way for us to escape and for us to go back and disconnect and become one, I guess, with nature and offer some sort of personal growth. To bring the stresses all full circle, right? The national park movement was one of those things that sort of gave people, regular people, the average person, access to nature once again. If you think about big cities, or the more wealthy people were often the ones who had access to nature, whether it was a little backyard or rooftop garden, right? But they were the only ones who could afford it. You get these crowded slums, tenement houses, maybe in like New York City. There's not a lot of greenery and green space. It's just a concrete jungle, right? And so we get things like Central Park as a way for the average New York a person to go and experience some nature still and have access to it. Well, John Muir puts us out in this idea that maybe, hey, look, we can all have some sort of cure for our, anxiety-ridden neurasthenia in the industrial world. And he says that if we go out and walk in nature and whatnot, there's some healing properties to it. Maybe not healing properties for, like, say, broken arm, but healing properties for our mind. And I think that Swiftcurrent Pass is one of those hikes that really proves that there are some healing properties when it comes to nature for our minds. And this is that positive stress, the good growth we're talking about. Now, the first time I did this hike, my wife would probably tell you it was a bad stress, right? Pretty early in our hike, my wife and I encountered a grizzly bear and her 2 cubs. Now, no big deal, right? But my wife was convinced that these grizzlies were gonna eat her because not long before we had lunch and she accidentally spilt some tuna on her pants. So she was certain, that's it, this is over, this is it, her life's done, so on and so forth. And so then as we kept going through the hike, every little thing kind of built and that anxiety grew and grew and grew. And so then when we got to like the steeper section, she just really kind of froze up. When I went with a group of guys, it was definitely one of those positive anxieties. Now, there's 2 types of people on this hike. Half our group was the kind of person that would walk as close to the edge as possible, peer over, look down, and the other half of our group was staying as close to the cliff or wall as possible and not even trying to look down. This hike can really make your knees buckle, but it's totally worth it. The views are breathtaking. It's just something that you could stand in every step as you look down or look at the wall, it doesn't matter. It takes your breath away, literally and figuratively. Now, hike details, right? That's why you're here, I hope. Aside from the history lesson, hike details. Every time I've done this hike, I've started at Many Glacier. And I've said it many times on this channel, Many Glacier is my favorite hike or hiking location, camping location in the whole park, right? And so from Many Glacier, you'll start at the Swiftcurrent Pass trailhead. It's kind of at the very end of the parking lot. And it's pretty obvious where you're going because it's the highest mountain you can see as you're heading deeper into the Swiftcurrent Valley, I think is what it's called. Some of those details. On that hike, from Many Glacier, the total distance to the pass is 6.8 miles and you gain 2,300 feet. Now this hike's awesome because there's sort of like destinations along the way, lakes, waterfalls, all that stuff. Once you start, it's 1.8 miles to Red Rock Falls. Now, this is the falls that I like. It's really impressive that there's the lower portion, which is like a series of cascading terraces or whatever. But then like above that, there's one fall that is a great location to swim. Now the water's cold, but it's not as cold as a lot of other places in the park that you'd expect. But as you're standing kind of on the falls, it's a good jumping spot. And there's probably like an 8, 9, 10 foot deep pool kind of at the bottom of this first little fall. It's a good swimming spot, man. And then, you know, the water's not moving so fast or anything, and it's really shallow before you reach the cascading portion a little further down the stream. So there's like no real risk of getting swept away, unless it's like peak snow melt season, I guess. But when we were there, it was free swimming, jumping, hanging out, having fun, all that stuff. Now from the falls, it's pretty much 5 miles to the top of the pass, okay? And it's relatively flat, relatively smooth, you meander along. But towards the end, as you get further and further, you'll realize that the pitch is gonna change drastically. You'll make one last pass over a little stream, and then you'll start going up immediately. And as you're going up, you'll be like, man, how the heck are we gonna get from down here up there? And it's one of those things that like, it seems there's no trail. It seems like there's no trail, but yet somehow you zig and zag back and forth up these mountains. And it's pretty cool, honestly. Now, when you get to the top, there's an optional side hike to go up to the top of Swiftcurrent Mountain. And I think there's a fire lookout there. And it's something that as you're looking up, it's just switchback after switchback, up, up, up. It looks intense, but it looks like it'd be worth it too. A cool spot, cool place to even get better views down the valley. But from that split where the Swiftcurrent mountain hike is, it's 0.8 miles to Granite Park Chalet. Now, Granite Park Chalet is really cool, like backcountry hotel, if you will. All stone and everything. And when you get up to the top of the pass, you kind of are in this rolling meadow area, and you can look down at the chalet, you know, about a half mile or whatever down. And it's really cool. It's just something out of like Switzerland, I guess. And I think that's what they kind of build it like, or where these chalets come from. It just looks like this little Swiss style home, house, lodge, whatever, set amongst all these mountains all around. And it's awesome. It's a cool view. And you go down there and it almost takes you back like 200 years. Just people chilling, playing board games, hanging out. There's like, I don't think there's any electricity, but I guess we weren't there that long to really find out. But it's just a cool place, very isolated, but just a place to hang out and take in the views. Now, some backcountry campsite information. The Granite Park backcountry campsite opens July 15th, roughly. It might open earlier, it might open later, depending on snow amounts, right? This was a pretty cool campsite, good to hang out, good views. When we stayed here, we stayed under the stars. We didn't put up a tent or anything. And to give you an idea, some of the stars were so bright that it was almost hard to sleep. It was like having a spotlight shine on your face. If you've never experienced that, I'm not making this up. It's true, that's how bright it was. I think we've got a time lapse or something we can show you about it as well, but it was awesome. To reserve that campsite, your trip must be a minimum of 2 nights, 2 or more nights, and you can't have fires at that campsite. But again, it's so beautiful, you don't need to stare at a fire. You can just sit and stare at the mountains, right? Now, the Many Glacier campground typically opens June 15th. To reserve that campsite, you must have at least a 3-night trip. And Many Glacier campground for backcountry campers, it can't be your first stop on a trip. And so that's why I kind of like starting somewhere on the Going to the Sun Road or whatever, and kind of like hiking to Many Glacier or whatever, just because it's a, I don't know, it's a cool little halfway point, a cool place to get to, and you still have the access of easy shuttles along the Going to the Sun Road. Now at Many Glacier, you can have campfires. There's actually a camp store you can go buy some wood from, but it's a cool place in the park to hang out and just meet people and kind of get some of those modern amenities while you're still on a backcountry camping expedition. Now, if you want to start on the Going to the Sun Road, you can start in 2 places, Logan Pass or the Loop Trail trailhead. If you start at the Loop Trailhead, it is 4.2 miles to Granite Park Chalet. But this one is very steep. So at about 0.8 miles in, it starts going up. And guys, it's up, 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 up. You gain 2,450 feet from the Loop Trailhead up to Granite Park Chalet. Now, another more popular hiking spot to start from, but it adds more mileage, is Logan Pass. You can take the Highline Trail from there to Granite Park Chalet. That one is from Logan Pass to Granite Park Chalet. It's 7.6 miles via the Highline Trail, and you gain 1,920 feet. Now, the Highline Trail, if you haven't heard of it before, is another knee knocker, if you will. There's a ledge above the Going to the Sun Road, and there's even a rope along the way because it's like 100, 200 plus foot drop down, and it's one of those narrow trails and whatnot. And so, you know, make sure you can handle that before you do that hike. But it's a very popular hike, and it's pretty much every step of the way just awesome views. Now, on your way up Swiftcurrent Pass, there's a series of switchbacks up there where you're on the edge of a cliff. One of them in particular is called Devil's Elbow. Now, I don't know about you, but everywhere in the world has some sort of like Devil's Curve or Devil's Hill or something like that. And they're notorious for being scary, right? That's kind of the thing about them, they're dangerous. Well, Devil's Elbow on this hike is much the same. It's this almost 90-degree switchback on the edge of a cliff, and you feel like you're on the edge of the world almost. And from this spot, there's a lot of awesome views. At Devil's Elbow, you can look down in the Swiftcurrent Valley back towards Many Glacier, and you can see Bullhead Lake and Red Rock Lake off in the distance. And when you're down by these things, they seem huge. But from up above, they seem miniature. They seem like, you know, one of those little kiddie swimming pools or whatever that you used to have and thought was the coolest thing ever until you got older and realized that you couldn't even get like your angle in them, right? Well, these things are beautiful, deep blue, right? And you can almost see the depth as it gets to the middle. It gets deeper and deeper and deeper. It's just awesome. Now, every time I've done this hike, I've seen moose. Moose? It's one of those, should it be different? Moose. I see moose on this hike every time. One of the most impressive ones, we're hanging out, seeing a moose eating off the bottom of the lake, and then this thing like pulls up out of the water and just, it feels like gallons of water just like pour off this thing's antlers, right? That one was pretty cool. Second time was more chill, just a moose eating off to the side. But I've seen moose both times I've done this hike. Now, one time was the bear time with my wife. That one was awesome, that was impressive, but I think you're about guaranteed to see some sort of wildlife on this hike. Now, at the beginning to Red Rock, it's busy, but once you pass Red Rock, not a lot of people keep going. You're only there for people going all the way up to Granite Park Chalet pretty much at that point. And it's worth checking out. So this is another Glacier National Park trail report. Please subscribe to us if you want more updates on any sort of backpacking stuff, Glacier National Park, whatever. We've got a trip coming up this summer where we're gonna head to either the Adirondacks or the Asheville, North Carolina area and do section of the AT. If you wanna follow along, check out more reports from the Scioto River Co-op, please do so. And again, thanks for stopping in and keep hiking.